And the first thing I want to go over is what you need to not take in the lead up to the Dutch. So for 2 weeks, you want to not take anything that's going to affect your cortisol, your HPA axis, and you also want to not take anything that's going to affect your sex hormones. So you're going to take out any herbal adrenal adaptogens like ashwagandha or rhodiola, licorice, ginseng. You're not taking anything in that category, right?
No.
Okay, great. So that's easy. And then also, of course, steroid inhalers, which you're not doing any of those, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Great. And then on the sex hormone side, you want to leave out things like chaste tree or any exogenous progesterone, anything that either is a source of sex hormones or that's going to affect sex hormones. Blue cohosh, black cohosh, you're not taking any of those, right?
Nope.
Okay, super. So we're good there. That means you don't have to do anything different as far as what you're taking in the lead up to the Dutch test. However, keep in mind, and I'm going to go to this page, keep in mind that for menstruating women, you have to do your collection at a specific time in your luteal phase, meaning it's between ovulation and when you start your period, but it's specific days. And I say specific days rather than between days 19 and 22, because that's for a 28-day cycle. So if your period is shorter, you have to adjust for that. If it's longer, you have to adjust for that. If you have any questions regarding what days you can collect to get an accurate sample, you can always call the 800 number for Precision Analytical. They have a team of people that work like 50 hours a week that help patients figure this question out. And sometimes when it's tricky, they'll ask people to get an ovulation predictor kit, because that's another data point that you can use to figure out where in your cycle you need to do that collection. Do you have any questions about that part?
No, real quick about the adrenal side though. Should I cut caffeine out for sure?
I think that that's a good idea. I like to have people just go off caffeine until we do the collection and get the data. The Dutch folks do recommend that you don't do caffeine on the day of the test. The Genova folks tend to let it slide, or they don't have as strong of a recommendation for the adrenal cortex stress profile, which is a similar test on the adrenal side. We know that caffeine makes your body produce more cortisol, and I prefer that you don't do caffeine on the day of collection. And I also think it's good to just take it out and see how your body feels. Let your body kind of normalize as far as what amount of cortisol your body is producing on its own without that added input to get it to produce greater amounts usually. Yep. The exception is if people are really attached to their caffeine, maybe they're going to have withdrawal symptoms, horrible headaches, if they can't function. In that case, sometimes we make an exception, but my general recommendation is yes, to take it out on the day of the test, and even better would be take it out now, and let's not talk about moving it back in until we get the data and see what's going on with your HPA axis. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, great. Any questions about what we've covered so far?
Nope.
Okay, super. Then I'm going to move back into the nature of this test, the Dutch Plus, what we're going to be collecting, and give you just a little bit of help as far as how to get the collection done. So what I recommend is when you get all your test kits, open them all up, orient yourself, start reading all the instructions. I usually recommend that you pick the one to do first that it feels the easiest to get done. So basically, whichever one feels like, yeah, I can get that done. That doesn't take as much bandwidth. Get the easiest done first and out of the way, and then do the next easiest, and save the one that's the most daunting for last, because then when you get to that one, you're like, I'm almost done. And that tends to be more manageable. I also recommend that for all of the kits, find any gel packs or freezer bricks. For example, the Ion, I know we're not talking about the Ion right now, but the Ion has freezer bricks that are teeny tiny and it's easy to miss. When I first did my own Ion, it didn't even register that those were like ice packs because they're so tiny. but you want to identify any freezer bricks and put them in the freezer right away so that when you're ready to ship out, they're frozen and they can keep the samples cold.
Thanks.
Okay. So, any questions about what I've said so far?
Nope.
Great. So the Dutch Plus, again, we mentioned a little bit ago before we started this video that the Dutch Plus is similar to the Complete in that you're getting stress hormones, sex hormones tested. You're getting markers that give you a lot of information about your adrenal function and your reproductive system function. The Dutch Plus is different from the Dutch Complete in that you also get a cortisol awakening response. So you're getting 2 more samples taken in the morning. With the cortisol awakening response, we want to see if your adrenals are doing what they should be doing in the morning, which is spike up within the first half hour after waking at about the half hour point. Cortisol should come up by about 50%, and then it should go back down and normalize in the next half an hour. So you get 2 extra samples that you're doing in the Dutch Plus, so you can see if your body is doing that cortisol awakening response in the way that it should. Some people it's flat, some people even goes down when it should be going up. So that's a great addition to have to the Dutch Complete. The Dutch Plus, I recommend orienting yourself with the part of the instructions here. There's 2 pages. It's kind of in the middle of the book. That's a nice guide for when you're going to be doing the collections. And I recommend using like a cell phone, your alarm and or the timer so that you can make sure to do the collections on time in the time window that is recommended. Because if you miss that window, we don't get as accurate data and the whole test can be rejected by the company. So you can see that the first waking sample, you're going to be doing saliva and urine. You see that in the PDF here?
Yep.
And then the second one, you're going to be just doing saliva, etc. So you can follow this chart and look at the instructions and make sure you get them all done at the right time. The urine samples are dried urine. So essentially you collect in a clean container. I like to use a mason jar when I do my urine collections. And you're going to dip that, it's thick paper. You're going to dip it in so that the urine soaks into the paper, and then you lay it out on the counter for 24 hours to dry. Once it dries, you can fold it up, put it in the shipping box. When you have all your samples, it goes out. But the last urine sample that's in that paper has to be dried, for 24 hours. It has to be drying on on a counter. So you want to make sure that the last sample is dried before you send everything in. The saliva samples need to go in the freezer once you spit in the tube. So they're handled a little differently that way. One goes in the freezer, one needs to dry out in the open air. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention is you don't want your saliva to be polluted by, like, you don't want to be sucking on a mint before you do your sample. You want a neutral mouth, and just make sure you read the instructions around not brushing or flossing. You can see here in the instructions, they guide you on how to make sure that you're not going to affect the samples by having some residue in your mouth from something that you ate, drank, etc.
I assume water is okay?
Your water is fine.
Okay.
So, and they have recommendations here. You can see, let's go back to that. They say, avoid caffeine and alcohol on the day of collection, avoid exercise on the collection day, just because that can be stimulating and affect cortisol. Don't brush your teeth until after collections number 3 and number 6. Don't floss on the day of the collection or until all samples are collected. So you can see that they make those recommendations. Okay. Do you have any questions about the Dutch Plus collection?
No.
So
I'm glad they have pictures.
It's nice to have the visual.
Yeah.
Yeah, this page, when I did my Dutch, I really liked to have this page like available and open on my bathroom counter. The last thing I'll say is that the Insomnia Sample, which I know you didn't purchase that, but for anybody that does purchase it, essentially, if you wake up in the middle of, and this is an add-on that can only be on the Dutch Plus, not the Dutch Complete. It's an extra $25. If you do the Insomnia Sample, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you spit in the tube, put it in the freezer, and go back to sleep. And then we get to know, are you waking up in the middle of the night because your cortisol is too high? We can get that reading in the middle of the night with that sample.